Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the newest episode of the Noobs and Knockouts Podcast. I'm Austin. I'm a knockout. I've watched a lot of wrestling.
I'm David. I'm a noob. I'm trying to watch more wrestling. I swear to God, get off my ass.
I'm glad you made me laugh because I did start that off a little somberly, and it just felt kind of natural because today I did have a plan for us to talk about, go back to the 1997, do an episode of Raw there. But for those our listeners who don't know, which admittedly is probably like all of our listeners, because we have a pretty distinct non-wrestling fan base, I think.
Yeah.
Is that Brodie Lee, who is a wrestler for AEW and formerly of WWE, passed away over the weekend on December 26th. He was only 41 years old. He was still an active wrestler. He had a match 2 months ago that I watched on TV, and we will actually watch that match, not for morbid reasons, but also because it was just a really good match. But yeah, but he was but he passed away from a non-COVID related lung issue. That is all we know about it at this point, and that's all we need to know. And I'm sure our listeners wouldn't be so crass as to claim that they might be lying, that the family might be lying about that it actually is COVID, but that they're hiding it out, because that's definitely not something that a small percentage of the wrestling fandom right now is having to deal with. Certainly not.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, you sent me screenshots of people being idiots about that, and holy hell! Like, really is the level of conspiracism in this damn country like that off the rails, that like a freaking like wrestler can't die without it being a whole Discord like conspiracy posting?
Yeah, no, it's very shitty, and to be clear, no. The fan, like, we're not gonna talk about the whole, I could go into a whole rant about why it's dumb. I don't want to use our podcast time for that, but just to be clear, no.
Me either.
It was not COVID.
No.
But anyway, so I guess I'm going to so what we're going to do tonight, instead of covering one in particular episode, I originally wanted to do that. But part of the problem of Brodie Lee is that there's not, between WWE and AEW, there's not really a good episode that I think that could completely just encapsulate him and his work. And that's part of the issue, I think, is that he was arguably never given the biggest spotlight he deserved, at least in my view. And so what we're instead going to do, instead of covering one episode, we're going to kind of do a bit of a retrospective on his whole career in at least WWE and AEW. He joined WWE in, I think, late 2012, early 2013. And then obviously he signed with AEW he debuted in AEW the very first pandemic episode of AEW. So late March 2020. So we're going to talk about him tonight because, and I'm not going to make this a whole lot about me, but I will say that for me, my feelings on it have been it's been kind of hard to kind of go through my feelings on it. And it feels so weird because, like, in the wrestling industry, tragically early deaths is just a fact of reality for historically of the wrestling industry. Pretty much any wrestling fan who has been watching for a long enough period of time has had to experience this kind of thing. But this is the first time I can think of a major wrestler who passed away, since I've been watching, who passed away while still being an active wrestler, And so for me, that's kind of, it's still hard for me to wrap my head around, and it's been kind of tough. But Brodie Lee is an absolutely incredible wrestler. He was even better human, and I think I'll highlight some of that as we go along. But we're here to mainly analyze wrestling, so wrestling I shall analyze. He's first of all, he was one of the most athletically gifted dudes for the guy his size I've ever seen. Like, the dude is like 6'5", like 300 pounds. Dude is massive, but he can move as gracefully and agile, and as agile as anybody in the ring. And he also is one of the most kind of, I think, underrated for his time, mainly because of how it came off in WWE in terms of as kind of a character worker. So I guess I'll go ahead and start with and segue this into like talking about like what his career trajectory was, and kind of use that to explain what we're going to watch tonight. Is that he debuted in WWE as part of the Wyatt family, which was, we've talked about Bray Wyatt a few times on this podcast because I love the guy. And Bray Wyatt started with a swamp cult, with a backwoods, creepy hillbilly swamp cult. And Luke Harper was one of his followers, his fireflies, as Bray Wyatt would call them. Him and a wrestler by the name of Eric Rowan. And they were both these two big hulking dudes, and it had this very cool visual of like Bray Wyatt, who's kind of average size. I mean, he's probably about my size, if a little bit bigger. And then he's got these two massive.
He's thick, but he's not like a giant.
Yeah, he's not a giant at all. But then you've got, Eric Rowan and Luke Harper towering over him as these kind of like brainwashed, followers of Bray Wyatt. And Luke Harper in particular, I always felt was incredibly good at kind of playing off this character, because he didn't say very many words. He in his time in WWE was not given a lot of opportunity to cut promos and speak lines. But his ability to convey his character across his body language and his facial expressions is kind of second to none, I think, during his time in WWE. He would have this this blank-eyed stare, because all in the eyes, man. You'd think that this dude is he's kind of crazy. He's not all there because he's just been he's a devoted follower of Bray Wyatt through and through. You can't reason with him. And him and Rowan had a lot of success as a tag team together with the Wyatt family. They won the tag team championships while they were a brief time on NXT, when that was a kind of a developmental kind of show. And then once they came up to the main roster, they were put on bangers, and they have a lot of we wouldn't have time on this podcast to kind of cover every great match that Eric Rowan and Luke Harper had together as a tag team, even during the period when they were with the Wyatt family. So the kind of match that we're going to cover is there is a 3-on-3 tag match between the Wyatt family and the Shield. I've talked about my love for the Shield many times on this podcast, and we've kind of just coincidentally not done an episode that really does them justice. But in 2013, it was almost like a dream match, if you could call it that, to see the Shield and the Wyatt family kind of come together, because there was a lot of interesting parallels to them. Is despite having vastly different characters, they both debut in a similar time period. They both come up from the NXT system, and there are these both 3-man units, and they were both putting on incredible matches and being credible characters for a whole year, for a year. And everyone just kind of wants to see those two kind of come together and collide. And they do end up having a bit of a mini feud that kind of exists as a filler feud. And because at the time of when this episode aired, Bray Wyatt had on a collision course with John Cena at WrestleMania a couple months later. So it's not it wasn't this deep feud, but it was very much there to kind of give them both something very interesting and fun to do before Bray Wyatt goes in head first with John Cena.
Was this after Wyatt or the Shield played stooge for CM Punk?
Yes, the Shield debuted as stooge for CM Punk, and by basically January 2013 is when Punk lost the WWE title. They kind of dropped that aspect of their characters, and this match takes place in February 2014.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. And it is an absolutely incredible match. It's the longest match that we're watching at just over 30 minutes, but it is action-packed and exciting the whole way through. I'm very excited to get to watch it again. And so I don't remember I'm trying to remember the exact time frame for when Eric Rowan and Luke Harper first kind of drifted away from Bray Wyatt. And part of the problem with that is that if you look at Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Bray Wyatt, their careers together, there was a lot of WWE doesn't quite know what to do with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan, so just put them back together with Bray Wyatt. Or if they're split as a tag team, put them back together as a tag team. And they always do a lot of good work together. And if I wanted to, overanalyze something they were not intentionally doing, there's an interesting story you could tell of these two victims of a cult being unable to ever mentally move past being in the cult. Like they try and they just keep drifting back in over and over again, but they never intentionally played that story. So I don't think it's totally fair to attribute that kind of, characterization.
No, I mean, no, they don't. I'm not sure. Knowing the WWE, it's a nice little bit of accidental symbolism.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's a fun fan headcanon, but it's just that it's fan headcanon. But Luke Harper did have a bit of a single.
But I mean that there comes a point where that's all that matters really. And plus, if they work together well in ring, and the fans can kind of have their own little oh well, in our minds this is why. It's not like it's not like that's any less real than the scripted stuff that's out there in front of them. So why not?
Yeah. I agree with that completely. But, Luke Harper did have a bit of a singles run in 2015, early 2016, that was actually really good. And we're not doing any matches on that one just because there is one storyline of his that I want to touch on that I kind of had to sacrifice for this one. But I will say that, and at the end of this, I'm going to recommend some matches that we don't talk about at the end, and we're definitely going to talk about some of the matches he had when he was on a singles run in WWE. He was never given much to do storyline wise, but the matches were incredible. So, kind of Luke Harper's almost shining moment as a single star, I think anyway, in terms of story in WWE, is in late 2016, where the Wyatt family is back together, but now with a new member, Randy Orton, the Viper. And David should have a little experience with Randy Orton. He watched Raw this week. And he's basically...
at least I started to. I actually need to go back into DVR, but yeah.
You should definitely watch the end of Raw this week. But
I know. No, I know. I'm so excited.
Yeah, but Randy Orton's always kind of at his best anyway. He's always had this character who is the Viper, a snake who cannot really be trusted, and is kind of this violent sociopath who could turn on you at the drop of a hat. And that's kind of what he's playing here, in that he joins up with the Wyatt family and is seemingly subservient to them. And Bray Wyatt is all in on it. He thinks he's got this hook, line, and sinker. I have got Randy Orton. And kind of a beautiful subtext to this whole feud is how Luke Harper definitely doesn't think that he's got this. From the beginning, Luke Harper, even though that he doesn't talk, he's just using body language and his own facial expressions, is extremely untrustworthy of Randy Orton. He very blatantly doesn't really trust Randy and is kind of expecting him to turn on Bray, and he's kind of almost pleading with Bray Wyatt in his body to see it. See what I'm seeing here, that Randy Orton is not on your side. Spoiler warning, yeah. Randy Orton was not on Bray Wyatt's side.
What a shock.
And in fact, Randy Orton burned down Bray Wyatt's compound. In fact, that's how much he wasn't on his side. That's how he turned on Bray Wyatt, was he burned down Wyatt's house.
No, Nice.
And Randy Orton, of course, is kind of
Randy Orton. I'm noticing. I'm starting to sense a pattern.
Yes, he does like
of burning things in relation to Bray Wyatt.
He does. That does seem to be a theme. And so the match we're going to watch is from February 2017, where Luke Harper steps up to have a singles match with Randy Orton in the lead up to Randy Orton wanting a piece of Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania that year. And it's a really, really solid match. And again, this is kind of Luke Harper's maybe best storyline as a singles wrestler, and that's why I wanted to include this match. Even if I could think of better matches from this singles run that I might choose.
No, fair.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because he isn't really the focus of the story, after this singles match with Orton, he kind of fades away into the background, fades out of the story to be focused on Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. And see if I have my timeline right here. I'll admit I'm kind of forgetting whether this is summer 2017 or summer 2018. I think it's 2017. But basically, this is the newest incarnate. Our last match from his WWE tenure is going to be as part of the last last incarnation of Luke Harper and Eric Rowan as a tag team. But now, instead of being, the swamp culty dudes, they're now the Bludgeon Brothers. And they have these kind of goofy ass hammers, mallet thing they carry to the ring. It's fun. But it is goofy as fuck.
Nintendo, guys, Nintendo's on the line. They're saying something about copyright.
Nintendo would like to know your location. And
oh, that's the meme. I couldn't think of the pithy way to put it.
Yeah. But they have a fun little run as the Bludgeon Brothers, and I admit it was also a bit more of an opportunity for Luke Harper to show that he can talk, because to kind of go back to the swamp cult problem, he didn't when he had that character of this kind of psycho hillbilly, he wasn't really allowed to ever cut promos. And if you hear Brodie say it, it was basically because Vince McMahon hated that Brodie Lee couldn't do a convincing Southern hick accent because Brodie is from Rochester, New York.
Look, man, we all got our challenges.
Hey,
lay off, Vince.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of why he never, even though he was actually pretty good at it, as we'll see in his AEW run, he was kind of hamstrung in his ability to kind of convey a character through dialogue in his WWE run. But the Bludgeon Brothers did give him a little more freedom, because now Vince didn't really care that he couldn't talk. He didn't sound all Southern because he's not part of the hillbilly cult. So the match we're going to watch is from WrestleMania. Oh, I know. I did remember. This is from 2018. This whole story took place in 2018 because it's from WrestleMania 34 in 2018, where they wrestled. No, this is in 2017. This is WrestleMania 33. Ugh, I should have looked into this deeper when I watched this. But basically, it's a triple threat tag match between the Bludgeon Brothers, the Usos, and the New Day for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. That's this match. And it's probably the weakest match on this list, and I kind of only put it here because I wanted a match from when they were the Bludgeon Brothers, but it's still not terrible. And all three of those tag teams are really, really good. So it's not like it's going to be awful. It's just not it's not something I would be if I'm listing Brodie Lee's best matches, that one's definitely not going to be there.
Yeah.
And so he kind of floundered around. Brodie Lee kind of, after the Bludgeon Brothers had their run, he kind of floundered around and he didn't really do a whole lot. And eventually he was let out of his contract in early this year, 2020. And he pretty quickly signed on to AEW, and he became, and this is kind of one of the bigger, if we're going to talk about wrestling tragedies in terms of stuff that happens on the TV show. They had these big plans they had a show in Rochester, New York, and this was going to be the night that Brodie Lee debuts in AEW. And pretty much everyone expected this to be like the biggest like cheers that Brodie Lee would see in his career at this point in time. And then the pandemic happened. And the show that was going to be in Rochester was the very first show that AEW did after they shut everything down, no more crowds, and were just taping out of Jacksonville, Florida for the time being. And like, that's kind of like, I feel bad for the guy that like, he was doing some of the best work of his career and he never got to do that in front of a crowd.
Oh, that's so freaking sad.
It is, yeah. But his work was pretty great because he came in as the Exalted One, the leader of the Dark Order. When we talked about AEW a few episodes ago, we that was kind of what the Dark Order was kind of in the middle of doing, of being like, the Exalted One is coming, and making all these like grandiose threats. And this episode, the episode where he debuts, is the reveal that Brodie Lee is the one who is the leader of the Dark Order. And this is and that kind of idea, like him going from being in a cult to kind of running a cult, has been a creative idea that Brodie Lee has said that he had pitched for years, but Vince McMahon wasn't, but WWE wasn't interested in it. So in AEW, he's like, he's finally getting to live out this storyline that he's had for forever. And Brodie was kind of like the perfect final piece for the Dark Order, because the Dark Order, when they started in AEW, they were kind of floundering a bit, and people weren't super into them. It was originally just Evil Uno and Stu Grayson, and then a bunch of random nobodies in gimp masks that made a human throne for Uno to sit on. I was kind of always into it, but it wasn't that popular. But they start kind of leaning into the like Scientology-esque cult crap, and they were talking about, and they filmed these fake commercials where they're like, stop being a loser and become a winner.
And that 12-step program.
Yeah. And that was where Brodie Lee came in, and he kind of like was the piece de resistance that brought it all together. As he was the blatantly tyrannical, rules with an iron fist cult leader who is blatantly abusive to all of his subordinates, but they're also kind of brainwashed into the cult, along with the help of people like Evil Uno, who kind of stepped into this role as like the nurturer within the organization.
Yeah.
Brodie would tear them down, and Uno would always be there to pick up the pieces and make them feel better after Brodie left. But all the members of the cult just kind of took it because they were all the way in.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it was really good stuff. And he kind of immediate, like, whatever storylines they were going to do with them out the gate, we'll never know, because the pandemic happened and suddenly their roster was very split across the country. Like, where pretty much the only people they had available were the ones who lived close enough to Jacksonville, Florida to be able to bring them in to do stuff.
Which is, oh God, it's just like the perfect storm, right? Of screwing so many people over, and now here, especially tragically with Brodie, now it's, oh God damn.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're going to talk too much about the ethics of wrestling in a pandemic for this particular episode. But I'm sure we will eventually cover. But I'm sure eventually we will cover a pandemic era wrestling show, and we can talk about it then.
Yeah.
So they kind of
Joy.
but so they kind of quickly throw together a program between Brodie Lee and Jon Moxley, who was the AEW champion, still the AEW champion, because they needed a big kind of storyline for the champ, because what they had already planned had to get scrapped, and Brodie Lee was right there. And Moxley and Brodie Lee have a long history together between their work on the independent wrestling circuit, and then in WWE, Moxley was Dean Ambrose. So him and Luke Harper had a ton of matches with each other, and then now in AEW, they have a pay-per-view championship match that is absolutely incredible. Would definitely not to get ahead of ourselves with match recommendations, but I would definitely recommend looking up Brodie Lee versus Jon Moxley for the AEW title. So Moxley beats Brodie Lee, and then so Brodie Lee kind of transitions into a feud with Cody Rhodes, one of our resident darlings around here. And Cody Rhodes,
very true.
In the aftermath of his storyline where he's no longer allowed to challenge for the world championship, he quickly becomes a kind of a stalwart in the mid-card title division, then known as the TNT title, the TNT championship, whatever you want to call it. It's what it sounds like it is. And it's branded by their TV network. It's all fine. But Cody But Cody did the very working the we'll take all challengers, kind of babyface champion shtick of he had a weekly open challenge where every single week he would have a championship match for the TNT title that anyone could challenge for, and they use that gimmick to also.
Okay. I kind of love that.
Yeah, when done really well, it's very fun. Like this story, or John Cena did this in 2015 with the with the United States Championship, was amazing.
It's like an invert. It almost feels like an inverse Money in the Bank sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like just open an invitation. Anyone can come for the title whenever they want.
Yeah. And they were doing, there was a lot of fun matches with that, but the story was that Cody was almost running himself ragged between doing these matches every single week, along with being an executive vice president of AEW. Until Big Brodie Lee arrived and challenged for the title, and he just demolished Cody and won the title with relative ease, and we're definitely watching that. And he was
yes. Oh, I'm here for it.
And so in August of this year, he became TNT champion. One of the few singles titles he would hold in his career, in the WWE AEW run. And so he was champion for about 2 months, and he was just kind of this dominant heel champion until Cody Rhodes came back to challenge him for the title. And they had, and this is the final match of Brodie's career, would be a dog collar match for the TNT title. Now, a dog collar match is one of those old school ass Southern wrestling violence fests where basically what they would do is they would take a dog collar and chain together, 2 dog collars, attach them to each wrestler's necks and then have at it. So the wrestlers are tied together with a collar and chains, and everything's legal. So it's always been kind of this viscerally violent kind of affair, and this one was no exception.
Oh my god! The really wild things that that they can come up with for fights. It sounds so silly, but I'm sure in practice is really gripping. But oh my god, that's such a silly concept.
I mean, when you say it out loud, it sounds goofy. But when you when you watch, and I'm sure David will agree, when you watch it, like it feels like this really violent, tense affair that just sounds silly when you say it out loud and explain what the rules are.
Oh my god.
So so Cody beat Brodie to win the title back, and then after that, Brodie would kind of be taken off TV going forward, and it was kind of it was kind of weird in that way of like, initially nobody really said anything about it because the AEW kind of had established kind of a mini pattern where sometimes that like someone will lose their big blow off match to a feud and then they'll just disappear from TV for a few weeks. It's kind of a way to like kind of give them a chance to kind of like refresh, restart, come up with have a focus on other guys instead of having this immediate expectation of like, okay, well, what's Brodie Lee got to do next? Like it allows them to focus on other people for a little bit before Brodie comes back. It's also very much in this vein of like, you can't, or like the heart grows fond, absence makes the heart grow fonder, that kind of thing. So initially there wasn't really anything to it of when it came out, when like Brodie wasn't around for a few weeks. And then, rumors kind of circulated about of at least that like he was injured, but, and there was more to it than that, but nobody wanted to say anything. And I think that it is as much as it is technically the bare minimum to do, that's not always what happens. So I feel like I should give a little bit of kind of props to the wrestling journalism world that did not at all leak anything about what was happening with Brodie Lee and his health until it was announced that he had passed away. Like nobody really knew anything. Nobody in the wrestling fandom knew anything about what was going on with Brodie until they were announced that he was passed and his family was willing to explain a little more about what happened. And so I do have to give my props to like the wrestling, journalism community not being, scumbags about it and talking about more than the family was wanting to indulge.
Yeah, no, the self-restraint on that is very very commendable in this case, I have to say.
Yeah, because it's since come out that like he was like hospitalized from almost like within a few weeks of his last match, and then he never really left the hospital. So there's this long period of time to know that something is more serious is going on, but they chose to not, divulge that. And so, yeah, I want, let's kind of through the career of Brodie Lee, at least in terms of his major time in WWE and AEW. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with his 9 years of work on the independent circuit. I know some of his major feuds and where he worked, and I'll talk about that more when we get to kind of the match recommendations outside what we're talking about here. But it's not something that I could comfortably talk about on the podcast and kind of talk about like what he did. And as opposed to his time in WWE and AEW, which I watched all of like as it happened. And so what we have is I think five matches, 2 promos, and if we have time for it, we're kind of on a tight schedule a little bit this week in terms of recording stuff. So I'm tentatively putting this here. They put in a that AEW did a tribute video that dedicated to his time on Being the Elite, which is AEW's YouTube comedy show, the vlog / diary like comedy show that they do on YouTube every week. And that was kind of where Brodie Lee like shined the best as the villainous leader of as the hard ass leader of the Dark Order, because every week the Dark Order would do these like goofball hysterical comedy shit, and then Brodie Lee would just run in here and be like, "What the fuck are you doing? you fucking idiots! Shut the fuck up!" Yeah, it was absolutely hysterical, and they run through and the video, while also having a lot of the members of the Dark Order talking about how much it meant to them to work with Brodie. They also show a lot of like the Brodie's funniest moments on BTE, and so if we have time to show that, I would really like to show it, but that is a tentative for the time being.
Nah. If we get the chance, I definitely want to check some of that out because that could be awesome.
It's pretty funny shit. So, yeah, that is kind of everything I wanted to talk about Brodie in the build up to this episode. So we are going to go ahead and start watching on, and I will see you guys in the back half. Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. We are back. I just kind of accidentally started off the intro again, but it's fine. Yeah, we are back from watching kind of a curated selection of Brodie Lee / Luke Harper matches and moments. I'm going to go ahead and open with the name thing because I didn't realize that I didn't really go explain them. I just naturally kind of shifted around between names, and so David asked me this while we were watching it. But so the thing is that Brodie Lee is not his real name. His real name is John Huber, just for sake of letting us know that. But he's never like all wrestlers. He kind of professionally and like in a public sense goes by whatever his wrestling name is. So that's how I know him as a fan. But yeah, Brodie Lee was his name when he was on the indie wrestling scene. He picked that name because he picked it from the character Brodie Bruce from Clerks, who is played by Jason Lee. And I think the story goes is that before he grew his massive beard, he kind of had a passing similarity to Brodie Bruce, and that's why he went with that name in particular. But that's where that name comes from. Okay. And then so when he went to WWE, WWE likes to have a copyrightable like name for wrestlers that they own, that only they own, and it was he eventually WWE would start allowing people to keep their indie names when they were a little more focused on trying to get that kind of like indie wrestling fan cred to like when they sign these big time indie wrestlers, keep the name that their fan base is already familiar with. But at this time, but when Brodie signed in 2012, 2013, that wasn't really how it works. So they changed his name to Luke Harper. And then that's what he was for the entirety of his time in WWE. And then when he left and went to AEW, he went back to going by Brodie Lee.
Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So there's like pre-established like name recognition for that name. Like it's not just random that they're trotting out the artist formerly known as Luke Harper, now known as Brodie Lee, being the Exalted One, and like everyone's like, why the hell is his name different? Why is he the same guy?
Yeah, no, Brodie Lee is from his days when he was an indie wrestler. He just kind of went back to going by that.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. It is kind of cool that like he was allowed this kind of very very concentrated kind of character flow between his indie days to like when he went to AEW. Everything like that whole process was all interconnected, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
I don't know how common that is for wrestlers to kind of like go from indie to professional to another professional company, but the fact that he got to do that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, AEW hasn't really done a whole lot in terms of like trying to like create names for wrestlers at this point, as opposed to like bringing them in under the name they already wrestle under. Really, the only major exception to this would be Evil Uno, and that's really because like his name was, I believe I explained this. I'm sure I explained this before at some point, but like Evil Uno's name is the way it is because on the indie scene, him and Stu Grayson were the Super Smash Bros, and he was Player Uno, and obviously that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So when they came up with the idea, so when they were like, all right, you're going to do this cult thing. And I admit, I don't know whose idea it was who came up with that in particular. But when they decided that was the direction they were going with Uno and Grayson, they're like, okay, your name will just be Evil Uno. That works.
Yeah, no. It was really cool because it felt like watching kind of in the all of the AEW stuff, like that company. I mean, the company clearly has a great amount of respect for every single person who wrestles for it. Like again, it takes a special kind of eye for talent to take Cody Rhodes, who, like, when we saw him in the Christmas special, wasn't that good, and then elevate him to where he is today to be like this amazing, like, lead character superstar.
And he does have better days in WWE than what we've seen. But yeah, I would also say that, like, his AEW segment is kind of is at least to me is my favorite kind of version of Cody Rhodes.
And I think that respect helps to bring out, like, the best in the wrestlers they bring on the company. I think that's why, like, I've found, like, what we've watched of AEW so strong. But what's really cool is they seem to have a special reverence for Brodie. Like, bringing him on as the Exalted One. Like, this, it's like, I know Brodie was, like, a decently well-known fighter for WWE, but it's not like he was, like, one of their, like, ticket-selling names, right?
He wasn't
those, like, he wasn't synonymous with the company, right?
No, and I'm not trying to make this a WWE bash fest, but I think a common fan critique of his time in WWE was like, dude has potential to be doing so much more than he is in this company. Like, he could have been a ticket selling guy, but they didn't. He wasn't ever really given it. And I think we got a good idea of that, from what we watched, that he had a lot of potential. That, like, he had a lot of potential to be a big star anywhere he worked. Whether he was given,
he did. I think the problem is that he didn't exactly fit, like, the Vince McMahon mold of, like, here's what my superstars tend to look like my big famous guys tend to look like. I think it was probably it might have come down to, like, aesthetic as much. But that being said, like, they clearly still gave him some decent booking. With some of the fights we saw him go in on, and on top of that, it then made it all the sweeter to then have AEW, like, really recognize his star power, and to see the introductory promo he got to announce him as the Exalted One. It felt almost prescient to like, with a forward eye to tributing this man as a superstar that could have had even more if he had the time to, or whatever else.
Yeah, and it's not to say that his WWE run, he was just doing nothing for 6 years. He had a lot of he had a lot of great opportunities.
Great.
He had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great moments. It just was sometimes like, God, look at him, do more.
Yeah, no, but I mean, again, it was really cool to see that the stuff we did, the stuff you curated for us to watch, was a really good showcase of what he was able to do. I mean, from the get-go, that Shield versus Wyatt match I was watching, everything he fought in, it just seemed like everything he did was effortless on his part. There seemed to be no, like, exertion for some of the physical feats he pulled off. It just seemed like it came naturally to him, and that was a really impressive thing to watch. And it was interesting for me too, because normally when I see wrestlers who present like that, it often feels like they're the type of wrestler who's there to, like, do the job and not play a role because they're just there to really focus on their athleticism, whatever. And while Brodie's never going super hard on, like, insanely well-crafted facial expressions or anything like that, he still gave this vibe that he was so into the character that he was playing, and that his intensity was just, like, hugely internalized, and it was just always present around him. He wasn't, like, going out there to play like Richard III, but damn if he didn't feel in character still for every second he was out there, and that was really cool to watch.
And I feel like that was always one of his like, when you look at, like, the Wyatt family, I think he was always the best at kind of playing the character that he had, in terms, if I want to talk about, like, commitment to the character, almost. Like, not that Bray Wyatt in comparison wasn't committed, but Bray Wyatt almost sometimes felt a little too cool for the fact that he's supposed to be this, like, hillbilly cult leader. Bray Brodie Lee, Luke Harper, always felt the most like, oh yeah, that guy's definitely in a hillbilly cult. I'll put it like that.
Well, I think too, like Bray clearly had a bit of an easier job of it because his character called for being the charismatic one, and that's clearly something Bray Wyatt has in spades. Whereas for Luke Harper, he was given a effectively non-speaking role. His whole job was to create a character effectively out of nothing, aside from the fact that he's like from a swamp and he's in like a stained like wife beater. And he did enough with that it still came across really well of like, this is an intense guy who's into some creepy shit. Don't get on his bad side.
Don't fuck with him.
Yeah, all just from the way he like widens his eyes and just stares with this kind
it's
of like,
all about the eyes.
That's
David.
all. That's all we did, and it was really effective. Yeah, no, I mean that was the thing they harped on a lot with him. But it works. I can see why that was a motif throughout his career, because he was good at just using his eyes to like give off just vibes. They weren't like, it wasn't crazy. It wasn't like super duper involved, but it just gave you vibes and it worked. And I really appreciate I appreciate that about him as a performer.
And the Shield Wyatt match, I'm glad it was as fun as I remembered it being. This is the first time I've watched it back in almost 7 years since it first aired. And now it was a blast to watch. Like
oh yeah, it's one of those things. Like I always kind of like try to stay away from saying this because I know like it can be taken as an insult. But what was really one of the things that was really cool about that match was the entire Swamp Cult, but Brodie like in particular, or whatever, Harper, seemed to just be loving every second of what they did. And like like it always feels slightly insulting to say like that was a big takeaway from the performance of just like, I could tell you guys are having so much fun, but it's kind of cool. Like they were so into it.
Yeah, and I feel like they almost, even, I don't know if they went into it with the idea of doing it that way, but it felt like they definitely kind of played into it once the crowd played into it that way. Like they emphasized a bunch of times on commentary to kind of like play off the fact that like the crowd is clearly very split, where half the crowd is very much cheering for the Shield and half is cheering for the Wyatt family. They're playing it off like the crowd doesn't really care about this, about a moral, like some grand moral play here. They just want to see like a bunch of badass dudes kick ass and have a kick ass fight, and I think that kind of plays into it too. They kind of lean into
and too. I know it was like there was a to that match. Like no one ended up bleeding by the end. But these were three really big dudes that were all just going off on each other. And it presented and with two very different aesthetics. And it was cool to just kind of see them all clash together, and they clashed hard. So that added to the entertainment value too. Of like, one, clearly the Swamp Cult was just like having a total blast doing what they were doing, and everybody gave this great physical display. And again, I'm trying not to like really, I'm trying to stay away from like saying cliched things like just because this is a tribute show. But I think I am justified in saying that Luke Harper was a standout of a standout performer. It was kind of like I noted kind of him, Bray Wyatt, and what's his
Eric Rowan is the third one.
No, but I was gonna say for the standout fighters in that whole match, Luke Harper, Bray Wyatt, and Roman Reigns were kind of the three big Roman, standouts of that for physical show off, and that was a really cool watch.
And I want to like to touch a little bit on what the story of that match was in a way that I would have appreciated, but maybe not necessarily you, because this is your first time watching both of their matches for both of these groups. Is that like a big whole part of the Shield's like MO is that like this, like they talk about it so much on commentary, the numbers game, by God. But basically the Shield, the Shield kind of made it like kind of their strategy to be able to like isolate in the, like, basically the idea was like nobody was a better 3-man team than them. and they were experts at creating these 3-on-1 or 3-on-2 advantages for themselves. And this match flips that whole thing on its head, where generally speaking, the team with the kind of advantageous numbers, to avoid using the same damn phrase, was the Wyatt family.
Mm-hmm.
All up until literally where they take out every member of the Shield one by one, with Dean Ambrose brawling with Bray Wyatt into the crowd, and just never. And 2 men entered the crowd, 1 man came back, and then they
left. Yup.
And then they put Seth Rollins through the Spanish announce table, so he's out. And then Roman Reigns has to go 3-on-1, 3-on-1.
Oh God. And because of that, it was really gratifying to see the Swamp Cult win too. Like like that felt like an earned victory. Like you could tell like they were really toppling a great force. And I think what helps too is like, again, they're very different aesthetics, is the Shield looks very polished, very well funded in a way. They look like a paramilitary organization. Whereas the Swamp Cult just looks like normal dudes in a way. And that was something I noted about Luke Harper kind of early on, is I really, really liked that he looked like a normal dude. It was very interesting to see kind of like his evolution from like he's wrestling in a dirty wife beater and jeans, all the way up to like him as the Exalted One wearing suit, like full tailored like whatever expensive material suits backstage, and his like grand cloak and custom made like in ring. It's kind of this interesting evolution that again, as a continuous character, makes it feel like this is someone who's like worked his way up in the world.
Yeah. He has kind of an unintentional, obviously, because we're seeing this across 2 different wrestling companies who don't work together, but you gotta have this unintentional logical character progression and arc for him.
Well, it even kind of manifested in WWE as part of the Hammer Bros, right? He was given a whole like kind of fancy jumpsuit, and like whole new aesthetic, and it was kind of like cartoony, and I wasn't sure I was kind of like I kind of like him better like in the Swamp Cult get up, because it just felt like weirdly cartoony for him. Like it felt out of place that he was like so dressed up. But then it paid off in AEW to bring him in as the Exalted One, and you're like okay, it was like a middle evolution. It was like the second tier Pokemon form before he ascends to the
one that no one cares about, because it's not
goes off.
The middle tier that no one cares about.
Yeah, exactly, which is appropriate for the Hammer Bros.
Hey.
But it's still intentional or not, it felt very gratifying to kind of see, and it made it work that he was no longer kind of like just a normal dude.
And I think that that Luke Harper, he was even when he was given a lot of non-speaking capacity, I think he was able to show a lot of range too. And you look across the first 2 matches that we watched, and like even at least to me, I think that you look at his match when he fought Randy Orton, even though he's still kind of doing the very same mostly mute. Like he still looks kind of the same. He's added a jacket now, and he still only ever really talks. Like he really only ever goes like yeah. Like that was his one line when he was with the Wyatts, but he felt like it felt totally different from him when he's now this kind of the sympathetic, harmed, good baby face to Randy Orton, who tore his family apart, compared to like height of their powers, heel ass Wyatt family.
Yeah. Well, it was really cool too to see that he had range, and that he had longevity. Like this is a man who was as strong in the earliest match we watched him in as he was in the latter match we watched him in. Ladder with 2 T's rather than 2 D's. But
Wait,
But,
that would have been. There was actually a ladder match of his that I thought about putting there, and that would have been a really funny pun if I had used it. But I'll save that for the recommends. The recommends.
But it's still and if at the very least as strong, if not stronger, and a fighter even more in his own. And again, this is the big tragedy of his early death is damn, this was a dude who was really, really going places, and like who had some well-earned respect in where he currently was. And imagine if he had gotten to keep going and kind of build himself up to be like this everlasting legacy character.
Yeah, right? like at the age of 41, he's still got plenty of years to go. Maybe he probably starts winding down in a few years from.
Yeah.
But like it's as I've kind of said, it's like it's wrestling, and in wrestling, you can as long as you can still physically move in a ring, you can extend your career way longer than you can in other sports, because it's super easy to hide the fact that you can't physically move the way you used to. And so like Brodie Lee could have kept wrestling in some capacity for quite a long time, even at 41.
And then be one of those that goes on to then become an announcer, even like an executive of some kind. Like clearly they were showing him off as some sort of as this really overpowering on-screen personality, and rightfully so. And that could have then translated really, really well to a post-ring side of his career too. So it's just so sad to see this cut short when like he was really, really getting to hit his stride and become like the grand character he kind of earned being.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So trying to think of where to go from here. I guess
Well, I mean, I wrote down some like other notes too, like
sure.
just some things about like this is kind of like a small little thing, but I also appreciate too, coming from about his whole eyes thing, like a lot of times playing off like a character whose whole thing is that like he's crazy, he's wild, he's whatever. It can be really, really cringy in some form or other. But it never was for him, which I really appreciate. Like the crazy eyes thing never felt like it was forced, never felt like it was just really silly. It felt natural. So like I appreciate too that he was a smart enough performer that his he was funny when he was written to be funny, but then when not, it didn't feel like he was silly. It didn't feel like his shtick was like overwrought or anything, which I really appreciate.
I would agree with that. Wrestling is not known for its subtleties, but compared to your average wrestling character, I think like the aspect of his character that is kind of like crazy or psychotic is much subtler than I think and effective and then I would think then you would see might be in an average performance of a character that is supposed to be crazy, of which there are so many in history.
Yeah. And so it's really cool then that he got to like kind of evolve past that and come into his own instead of just kind of fading into obscurity as just one of the stock crazy dudes that we keep in the back room. We need like a vaguely supernatural heel, right? I think and watching that tribute that people did of him, and I know like somebody like passed away, especially if they pass away young, everyone's going to speak really, really highly of them, right? But like watching the tribute the Dark Order made for him, I could really tell there was this genuine sense, especially watching the compilation of clips from their like comedy series. I promise I'm not just saying this because like he vaguely looks like him, but he almost kind of felt like the Jim Henson of the Dark Order. This kind of figure that had such a positive, like, such an aggressively positive influence on those around him. Those the kind of guy who like was very deserving of his leadership role because he was just such a positive person to be around. And so I think it probably speaks to the fact that he probably was a bit of a standout dude. If we have all these super nice things to say about him, that he was that he wasn't just made another stock backroom henchman.
No, he like it can almost feel a little as someone who is kind of tuned in more to like the wrestling social medias and I've read all of the stories from the wrestlers who most closely associated with Brodie and his career, from the Dark Order to the Wyatts, that he was very close with the members of the New Day, with the guys in the New Day. And like, there's been such an outpouring of like good stories about this guy. Like it sucks that seemed like one of the most genuinely nice and compassionate dudes in wrestling, one of the better family men that you find in the wrestling industry. It's like every like a consistent thread across like everyone who's ever worked with him is his absolute willingness to like be there for you and support you in any capacity, no matter how important you are on the show. Like John Silver of the Dark Order was told a story about even before he was like kind of a breakout star of the Dark Order for because of their comedy sketches, when he was kind of just like this jobber character, Brodie Lee would still like watch his matches and give him constructive feedback after the matches. And John Silver was super appreciative of that and was like, he didn't have to do that for me. He's like a real time star. And I'm a small timer in comparison. He didn't have to like pull me aside and like work with me to help me get better. But everyone talked about how much he cared about the people he was working with, how much he cared about them like improving and being their best as performers. And it was watching that, to read all that.
Yeah, and watching that tribute, even though I'm not as plugged in, I really did get a sense of like what a magnanimous personality that was. And you being cued in, so kind of cued into the social media side of wrestling and kind of being able to get a gauge more on how people are bumping into each other like backstage. For you to have that barometer and say like, yeah, this seems like a guy who was genuinely deeply loved by the people around him, the people he worked with, and that this isn't all just blowing smoke up a dead guy's ass to puff up his legacy a little bit. Is really kind of a heartwarming thing to hear. He's one of those people that like that if you were in his position, you would want to strive to be the kind who even when he's given great position, this great opportunity to really be like a star player in all of this, that he still deeply cared about those around him and just had such a seemingly effortless compassion for his peers. Again, speaks very highly of him, and I would not be at all surprised if that kind of really positive personality about him, that kind of force for good energy he seemed to have, helped catapult him a little bit and keep him and keep him in the good graces of those above him who had power to put him where he got put, and for them to say like, this is a good guy and he deserves more. Like, again, I don't know what goes on in the writing room, but I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of like if his goodness was like, is spread far and wide enough, it was infectious enough, they were like, yeah, we want to give this guy more. I would especially not be surprised if that's why AEW kind of like brought him into the fold as hard as they did, because AEW seems to really respect really be built on a world of respect and non I don't even know like non like I don't know the term I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. They seem to be built on a certain integrity, right?
Yeah. They definitely had it. They definitely had a very high level of respect for Brodie. That's extremely obvious in like how much he was able to do in such a short time with AEW.
Yeah, and yeah, so it is kind of like, damn, it sucks that he's gone when he did, but I will say like it is really good to see like what he was given in his time, because what he was given was really good, and I do want to speak a little more too to just what a talented athlete this guy was. Like through all the matches we watched him in, like they were long matches. Aside from like the first one he did with Cody, that they just used an excuse to get Cody off the show for a few weeks so he could film something. These were long matches, and obviously the dog collar match especially brutal. Like those were two gifted men who still had to go really hard to bring out the sheer savage brutality of what that match was supposed to entail. And the fact that he hung on the way he did in all of those matches and somehow did not seem to tire, at least not as much as a lot of his colleagues tend to after a long period of time. I think spoke to I'm sure how seriously he took his position, not only as a performer but as an athlete. This is a dude who's clearly like naturally big, but you can be naturally big and still be out of shape and not be able to. But no, this guy hung in all of the matches despite how hard he was getting beaten up on, especially in the Orton match and especially in the dog collar match. What this dude had to offer was clearly a little bit unique to these companies, at least in terms of stamina. Yeah,
like he is absolutely one of, as I've said, as I think that in terms of his endurance and his agility, it's rare to see that in a man his size, in a wrestler his size. Most wrestlers his size are a lot more lumbering and a lot more like immovable object kind of wrestlers, a la an Andre.
I've been trying to come up with a way to like kind of express this, and I think I think the term I've settled on is he's deceptively large. Like if you look at him for a little bit, like really look at him, you realize, oh man, this is a big dude. But you see him move around, and if you're not really focusing on like his stature alone, he doesn't feel all that big. Partially because he's he's got kind of like a slimmer build, but partially because he's really agile, and he doesn't kind of move with the same like lumbering slowness that a lot of like bigger dudes in this world do. There's a certain spry to his step that really that doesn't make him feel like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost as if we want to kind of analyze like the In's character aspect of it, makes him all the more terrifying. that he's not.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
He's that big. Also, yeah, he's fast enough to keep up with you.
Yeah, no, like I said, this is a dude whose bad side you do not want to get on. And it made you really feel for the types of people who did get on his bad side, especially Cody, because like that was like you would kind of see it in the Orton match, like the storyline was that this is the dude who betrayed the Wyatt family, who blah blah blah, and this is Harper getting his grand revenge or whatever, and like but that didn't get played up as much like in ring as it did by the announcers, like it just seemed like he was going in with the same kind of intensity that he did for the Shield match of just, I'm a crazy dude. You did me a little wrong, but even if you didn't, I'm gonna fuck you up anyway. But with the Cody match, with that whole storyline, there was a desperation there. That dude was going hard. And it did add to the fear factor of Cody's kind of the slimmer, quicker dude. At least he looks like it. oh no, old Brodie, the Exalted One, is keeping up with you at every step. Like this match did not that was evenly matched all the way through. He was not overpowered until the very end. He had his whole face covered in chains. But he still broke out of it and still was quick enough and strong enough to come back and still get a few good punches in on Cody before he eventually had to fall. Like that does add to the fear factor, and very effectively so.
Oh yeah, and that was kind of like Brodie's presentation in AEW all the way, is like how much of an almost unstoppable this guy is. Or he's not technically unstoppable, but like you got to bring your A game and then some to beat him. Like his match with Jon Moxley,
they don't play it up that he's unstoppable.
It is kind of more, I think, I guess a little more of a subtle beat. But like you look at when he wrestled Jon Moxley, which is his only other loss, Jon Moxley had like put him through like the stage set. Like they did a whole bit where Jon Moxley DDTs him through the stage, and Brodie still kicked out of that. Like Moxley had to like start creating new moves for himself to do to be able to put Brodie away. And all he did was he made Brodie pass out. He didn't tap him out. He didn't pin him. He had to make him pass out to win. And this is your world champion. That's kind of what
Cody had to do too.
It was very similar because he kind of had to choke him out with the chains and before he could do his signature move to incapacitate him enough to pin him.
Yeah. Which again speaks to not only how good the writing on him was, especially in AEW, but what a strong motherfucker IRL this was. Like you don't get slammed through the stage, even if the stage is rigged. I don't care. You don't get DDT'd through the stage, and find ease to kick out of a pinfall, even if it's not meant to be the pinfall that gets you.
Yeah, that's got to be a pain in the ass.
Takes a certain level of strength, and of course it has.
That's that definitely had to have hurt, even if it's obviously they rigged those stage in a spot to be able to do it. That has to hurt like hell to have to do.
And clearly this was a dude who through even in his WWE career was made to take a lot. And what's really impressive about that is that didn't seem to take and again, who knows, had he lived longer, had he really really been put a little more through the ringer or whatever. But it didn't seem like, at least this early on, it wasn't like especially physically screwing him up like it probably would if some of his contemporaries, if they had to take some of the beatings that Brodie Lee had been made to take.
Like, no, dude was, even if he's having these hard matches, dude was in the physical shape of his best shape of his life.
And again, speaks super well to his work ethic, and then speaks even more to his character, that he still found the time and energy to be there for his peers. Like he was in all the best ways kind of a freak of nature, who could have just coasted on his, on his whatever, and not really given a shit about anything else because he didn't have to. He was too much of a star to, but he didn't. He genuinely seemed to care about the people around him, and genuinely exuded this kind of special je ne sais quoi that helped him stand out, not only as a performer, not only as an athlete, but as a person. And that kind of makes it this really kind of beautiful image of a person who, man, could have had so much more ahead of him. So could have gone on to even bigger, even better things.
Yeah, and
it is kind of that cliche of like, damn, all the best ones are gone too soon,
Yeah, I agree. I haven't had a chance to kind of bring this part up to it, but I think that it'd be a little it's a little cheap to say that like AEW kind of allowed him to show off his truest range as a performer, but I feel like that's definitely true when it comes to his comedic chops, because oh my god, was he's so fucking funny on
AEW's
YouTube
the thing
show.
is too. Because the thing is, like his comedy style was clearly, screaming and throwing things at people / hitting people with things. And that's one of those shticks that like can get really old really quickly, but like it seemed like it was fresh all the way through. Like he found ways to divvy it up. I don't know like who was writing those skits, if like they kind of like ad-lib things, if like the Dark Order themselves were writing for them, or like if they had other external writers for them. But it felt like this organic comedy style.
Yeah, it's my kind of understanding that that's mostly because it's just a goofy YouTube show that technically doesn't mean anything to anything, that it's kind of like self-written by everybody involved. Like you kind of write your own shit. Like that's my understanding of it.
And I love that. I love that because then it then speaks to, these are guys who came up with some honestly pretty creative visual gags. And it had this great combination of the humor of a bunch of like dudes hanging around being drunk and just laughing their asses off at dumb shit, while also still being kind of this polished gag machine of a show. And if that was like directly represented their sense of humor, I think that that's another great kind of buckle on Brodie's belt.
Yeah, I don't think it can be emphasized enough how much being the Elite kind of revitalized the Dark Order in terms of fan perception. I think you could definitely argue that like the story leading up to Brodie coming into the group definitely made them feel more like a threat and like interesting heel characters on TV. But in terms of like the fan base kind of making the Dark Order into almost fan favorite characters, being the Elite was where that happened, because every week they're just coming up with these, they're cranking out memes by the week. You got like him throwing the papers, 40,000 fucking emails, calling John Silver a fucking idiot. You're gonna cry, you little bitch.
Are you crying?
You crying? You little bitch.
I love to him on the call with Evil Uno of hey, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Get a stack of paper and take it and then hit yourself over the head with it, and then it comes back to Evil Uno and he just like he magically has a crumple of papers in his hand, and he's like, well, shit, boom.
He does like a little scream every time he gets hit with the papers.
Yeah, a little Wilhelm scream. Oh my god.
No,
it's the best one when he opens up his jacket and he's got two of them, and everyone's like, he's packing heat.
Like they're like terrified of it, and he's just got like two rolls of paper in his jacket.
It was so good.
No, I also
stuff that I'm like, damn, that's so legitimately funny.
No, I also love when Evil Uno puts on the Jaguars football helmet and he gets hit with the paper and he's like, "Ha, it worked!" and then he takes the helmet off to talk about like, "Oh, I heard about concussion protocol," and then Brodie just hits him with the papers after he takes the helmet off.
Oh my god! Or like, I mean, Brodie wasn't like obviously directly involved in this one, but like John Silver being on whoever's shoulders and like wearing Brodie's coat.
He was on his tag team's shoulders. He's like, "Where's the paper?" He's doing the impression, and then Brodie walks in and sees it, and he like first looks up at Silver, and then he tells Reynolds like, "No, put him down. I'm not looking up at him. Put him the fuck down," so he can yell at Silver about it.
Oh my god! Again, not only effortless athletically, effortlessly nice, but effortless. This dude was somebody who exuded charisma. And it made it so much fun to like watch those skits, because like you could tell everybody was having fun. You could tell that like Brodie just like had command of that space of performers, just jerking them around however the hell he wanted, because everyone had so much respect for him and was like, yeah, you want to hit me with papers to like make people laugh and scream at me and slap me and call me a bitch? Absolutely, please, by all means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you got the like, and like as he said, like Brodie would pretty much just like scream his way through breaking every time.
Yeah. What are you doing?
You know, and then honestly, my favorite one, and I might have to explain a little bit, like the Sue thing, because okay, Sue is Trent's mom of the dark of like the best friends, and like so they added this little shtick for him every once in a while. Like Trent's mom would bring them to the arena in a minivan to kind of add to the like the best friends like wholesome shtick. And so then for the internet show, they film a bit where Sue joins the Dark Order, and so she is a guest, like a reoccurring guest character in the Dark Order, and so. But whenever the Dark Order happens, they like refuse to let her know. Like they were always like, "Oh, hi, Sue." Like they're all like super kind and nice to each other and polite whenever Sue's around. and so they have the bit with Sue where she brings the food and then Brodie throws it on the ground because he's still yelling at Silver, and then Sue comes back and is like, what's going on? And then Brodie just immediately goes, Sue, this motherfucker doesn't like your food. And so she throws the paper at Silver, but she misses the first time, and that's what gets Brodie to crack on camera. It was when she missed the papers.
That's the one time Brodie broke. Is when Sue fucked up the paper, bro.
And then
my god, that's so funny.
I forgot they didn't show it, but like she gets to redo it, and she throws the papers on Silver, and this time it hits. But at first he doesn't really react to it, and then Brodie just immediately goes, "You better go the fuck down for Sue. You better sell for Sue." And he just starts screams at Silver until he falls down on his knees.
Oh my god! Why is that so funny? That that whole Dark Order thing has absolutely no right to be as deeply entertaining as it is, but here we are.
Absolutely, like so much of it is just like the humor is just like Brodie swearing up a storm and yelling at these idiots for acting like idiots, and it's so funny.
Oh my god, dude, that's so good. I fucking love that.
No.
Oh man. It really is. Like again, as sad as it is that he's gone so early, it is nice that like he has this extensive a catalog to look back on.
Absolutely. And speaking of, there is so much to this catalog that we didn't even really touch because I had to cut this down to like 2 hours of content to watch. So I had to cut some things out. And so I kind of want to go into some of the stuff like for the viewers at home, if they would want to see some more of like Brodie Lee's best stuff, what are some examples of some good stuff they could watch of his?
On top of the Dark Order comedy sketches, please God, I'm begging all of you, go watch those.
Definitely. There, if you type in like Dark Order BTE compilations, there's like 5 of them now, and like go watch them. It has all their skits, not just Brodie stuff, but the stuff that like Silver and Reynolds do when they're trying to recruit people into the Dark Order, and like all the skits that all of them have done are incredible and worth watching.
So good.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so some other stuff to work is indie work. I had to do a little bit of research into this myself as best I could, but and it's not very, and I'm just not very familiar with this indie work to be able to confidently talk about it. But you want to look at Brodie Lee's work in CZW. That's Combat Zone Wrestling. It's basically a deathmatch promotion. So if you're a little queasy about blood, probably don't watch this. But him and John Moxley in CZW are classics. You look at Chikara, which is kind of a, I don't even know if I could explain Chikara, but basically his work with Claudio Castagnoli or Eddie Kingston in Chikara is worth looking into. He's had a run in Ring of Honor with pretty much every major person. You go into WWE, look at WWE, some recommendations off the top of my head. You have the Wyatt family versus the Usos, 2 out of 3 falls at Money in the Bank 2013 for the tag team championships. If the Shield match didn't happen, that's the one I would have picked to talk about the Wyatt family tag team kind of era of his career, because that match was an incredible show stealer of a match. Then, singles matches, Luke Harper versus John Cena on Monday Night Raw, either in 2014 versus 2015, was a heck of a match. The ladder match that I was going to put on here, and then I decided we should use something with the Bludgeon Brothers, so I didn't use it, was Luke Harper versus Dolph Ziggler for the Intercontinental Championship at TLC 2015 in a ladder match. And that match stands out to me is like, by this point in time, the ladder match has almost become kind of like a conduit for like flippy athletics. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying that because Luke Harper versus Dolph Ziggler is the most brutal ladder match I've seen in a long time. And I remember being like viscerally shocked by how violent this ladder match is, because it just it's violent in a way that ladder matches haven't been in a long time. Definitely worth checking that out. Luke Harper versus Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose is the John Moxley when he was in WWE. But him and Harper had a Extreme Rules street fight at Extreme Rules 2015. A good kind of WWE violent, TV PG violent match, but still very good match. Absolutely. They do this very fun thing where like the idea of a street fight is that even if it has to end in the ring, it can go anywhere. So literally they film the match to where they leave the building and they like brawl out in the streets before they come back to the arena to finish the match. It was really kind of a fun little thing they did there. And then Luke Harper, and when he's with the Bludgeon Brothers, we had the WrestleMania match with Usos and New Day was a pretty quick one, but they also them and the New Day had 2 great matches. Their tag team against each other at SummerSlam 2018, and then their match on SmackDown where the New Day won the tag team titles back. If you really just look up Bludgeon Brothers versus New Day, it'll come up. And those are both really great matches in their own right. I picked the one at WrestleMania because that's the one where they won the titles. So I was like, I'm going with that one. I don't want to watch them lose. I
will say we didn't touch on it much, but that WrestleMania match was a ton of fun to watch. Like, it was so fucking colorful, and it was so much fun to see Brodie just like go ham, or I guess Luke go ham, just off the bat, just like yeeting everybody. We didn't touch on it much because like there's not like a whole lot to say about it. The focus a lot more was on like the one team. But damn, if it wasn't cool to see Luke Harper just wreck shit from the get-go, and with everybody just looking real colorful.
No, it was kind of like it was a quick 5-minute match that was just a lot of fun from the start. So definitely, if you're looking for something quick to watch, definitely go.
Yeah. And oh my god, it's just delightfully whimsical. Like, they're fucking chucking pancakes into the audience. One of them plays the goddamn Dragon Zord theme on the trombone. For those of you who are Power Rangers fans, it was so much fun. And Luke Harper just comes in and fucks everybody up. And it's like,
nah, he ain't having none of this silly shit except for the plastic mallet. But all the other silly shit there,
the giant goddamn hammer.
Yeah, which they never use as weapons, or like they'll do it, but then they'll do that really boring thing where they use the hilt of it so it doesn't actually hurt anybody. Like, they don't like go at it hammer. They don't swing a hammer like you would swing a hammer if you hurt somebody with it.
Boo.
Yeah, and then in AEW, I think you could look at because his AEW run was so short. There's not a whole lot to I would argue that we didn't get to there, but I will say he does have a pretty solid match with Dustin Rhodes for the TNT title. Oh, I forgot. Obviously, the big one is his AEW World Title match with Jon Moxley that we kind of touched on. We were talking about like his booking as a guy you got to bring your A game to beat. That was a phenomenal match, and if it wasn't, it was. But the only reason I didn't pick it is because it's goddamn long, and so I kind of was like, well, I can include the Moxley World Title match, or I can include the dog collar match. And I was like, I'll go with the dog collar match.
Yeah, I will say it is kind of cool though that one of his big ones in his short time with AEW was with a guy who he fought with all the way back in the indie scene.
Oh yeah, that is kind of nice. He has a long history with Jon Moxley. And then he had a singles match for the TNT title with Orange Cassidy. And definitely, if I thought I had more time to do it, I might have thrown that in there just so we could have an excuse to talk about Orange Cassidy. Because it is actually legitimately kind of hilarious contrast of styles when you have like Brodie Lee is this hard-hitting, no-nonsense kind of in ring, and in comparison you have Orange Cassidy, who's nothing but nonsense, with who's as the laziest wrestler alive.
That sounds so good. I gotta look that up because I'm dying to see some Orange Cassidy, and pairing him up against Brodie fucking Lee sounds hysterical.
It was a fantastic pairing. But yeah, I think that all those kind of matches, I would say that like definitely if you're kind of looking for some more Brodie Lee, Luke Harper kind of content, definitely do that. And I think we're kind of in the wrap up here of our tribute episode to John Harper, aka Luke Harper, John Huber, aka Luke Harper, aka Brodie Lee. It's definitely it's definitely a tragedy to have to lose him so early, but the career he did have was pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Rest in power. The world needs more people like this man. If he was the not only clearly dedicated performer he was, not only the clearly genuinely invested kind of worker he was, but more than anything else, of course, the clearly magnanimous, delightful, sweet guy that he was. The world needs more Brodie Lees, definitely. So at the very least, hopefully his death, tragic as it may be, hopefully at the very least, maybe it can help rise his star a little bit posthumously, and hopefully set a good example for some people who find themselves taken with his stylings both in and out of ring.
Yep. Yeah, and in about an hour, I hate to always reference when we actually record these, but in about an hour, AEW is going to air their tribute show for Brodie Lee, and man, I'm not ready.
Oh God, I'm glad I'm going to be in rehearsal during that because I don't feel crying tonight.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So next week, the first show that we will record in 2021. This is a little weird because this is our last show recording in 2020, but I will not release this until 2021. So that's funny and weird. But yes, next week we will get to.
Oh man.
But next week we will get to they go back to 97. We will watch The Cure for the Common Show. Get a little attitude on this podcast.
God, okay. This week we talked about the very sad the very sad topic of the death of Brodie Lee. Next time we talk about the much more fun concept of the death of kayfabe. A death I feel much less morose about discussing.
Absolutely. All right, so I think it's time for the plugs.
All right. As always, first of all, thank you for listening, especially this week. This is a show that means a lot to. This was a guy that meant a lot to his fans. And so thank you for kind of joining us on our attempt to pay proper tribute to him. Thank you for listening in general. If you want to hear more of us, our podcast can be found on YouTube, the Noobs and Knockouts Podcast. So you can also find us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Noobs and Knockouts Pod. That's Noobs and Knockouts Pod, because Twitter's annoying about how long your handles can be. If you want to reach out to the show, I know, boo. If you want to reach out to the show directly, give us some feedback, let us know, see in the future. Shoot us an email at noobsandknockspod@gmail.com. And yeah, we look forward to we look forward to all of you joining us for the next show. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you.
And one final time, rest in power, Brodie Lee.